from a reliability standpoint, how do you think Ohio coal-fired power plants will be able to comply with utility MAC and provide electricity during peak hours, such as in a heat wave like we have had here in Ohio recently?
Well, it's I guess the issue is not so much the plants that are operating and can comply. Mr. Ahern talked about the Cardinal plant and the expense that he believes his plant can comply. So we will have some facilities that will be able to comply. The issue is all of the facilities that are closing and are not going to be in operation. Where are we going to get that capacity from to make up when we need the electricity?
Let's turn to that issue. How many electricity generating units have already been prematurely retired as a result of utility MAC, and do you have any idea how many are projected?
Well, there are 25 specific boilers that are shutting down as a result of the utility MAC and other EPA requirements that have been announced. And that's about over 5,000 megawatts of capacity that will be gone in the next 3 years.
I know that you sit in a regulatory agency, so I don't know how many businesses you talk to, but do you have any sense of the direct effects of the increased electricity prices as a result of EPA's air regulations? Are companies laying off workers and shutting down businesses?
Well, there certainly is a direct impact when electricity rates go up. The example of Representative Thompson of Ormet that is just down the river, the aluminum producer, that they have laid off some workers, and if the price of electricity continues to go up, that will be the course there, and that is a huge employer in Ohio.
Okay. Mr. Ahern, will regulations like the utility MAC increase the cost of electricity that you provide to your customers, and what implications does this have? Now, we've dealt with it a bit, but I want to give you a chance to expound on it. What implications does this have for economic growth and job creation in rural areas like your company serves?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Johnson, it's unclear to us exactly how the utility MAC might expose us to additional costs. We're hoping that it doesn't, but as I mentioned previously, one of the big uncertainties is the monitoring requirements. Mercury is just so dilute in concentration that it is extremely difficult to measure. And what sort of testing requirements will they have? What sort of testing frequencies? Tests can, particularly with very dilute concentrations, can sometimes you can actually be performing well, but the test will raise doubt, and so you could be required to spend a lot of money on testing, a lot of money on monitoring equipment. Overall, it's difficult to say exactly how it's going to impact us, but as I described, the accomplishments that we've had so far have added up to $1 billion of capital cost and $20 a month for the average consumer. We don't think it's appropriate to add any more costs on top of that, because our customers have already paid for a significant improvement in air quality.
Well, do rural cooperatives like yours, do you have reliability concerns about the utility MAC compliance, particularly during the peak hours?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Johnson, anytime you do anything to the old, it can affect the whole electric system. Everybody that's connected to it is potentially impacted. Even though our plants may do it, may be fine, may be well controlled, may meet the standards, if others around us retire, if there are reliability problems because a lot of generation is taken out, we will be impacted in probably the most direct and costly way of the possibility of blackouts.
Okay. the co-op wants to build a new coal-fired power plant, will it be able to, given the new source performance standard for greenhouse gas emissions?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Johnson, I don't see how with the proposed greenhouse gas standard, anyone could take on the task of building a new coal plant.
Okay, all right. Representative Thompson, let's come back to you. We talked a little bit before about the effect of reduced coal production on state revenues, but what about local government revenues? I know you and I, we talk to a lot of local government folks that are struggling to fund their sewer upgrades, their water upgrades, also a part of a regulatory process that's being mandated on them. And yet they don't have the funds to be able to do that. What effect on local governments would this diminished revenues as a result of lower production and use of coal have?
Mr. Chairman, Congressman Johnson, I think, again, in kind of a more of a micro way, they count on all the local jobs, the people that are paying income tax. They count on the services that are used locally by these coal companies and the utility companies. So they're very much, their base revenue sources are very much dependent on these companies. And again, we talk about local government, we talk about schools that are going to be suffering, school districts. And in many cases, the utilities are partners with local charities and things. So there's so much, it radiates through so much of that local economy. And it's obviously very tough for local governments right now because of revenue at the state level and also at the local level. So any variable that you introduce into that equation is really going to harm them in a significant way. And this is something that doesn't have to happen. This is something that is happening in Washington by design. And this war on coal and this disdain for, again, our electric utilities and also our coal producers and the livelihoods that are dependent upon it, it's a huge impact. And you and I are experiencing, we hear it. And as I said, the discussions and the palpable fear in local communities is on the rise. And I hope we can turn this back. I hope we can reverse this. A lot of it's underway, and it's hard to get bureaucracies to move in the right direction. But I appreciate what this committee is doing to call attention to it, and I'll do everything I can in the state of Ohio to be of help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I give that.
Great. Now recognize Mr. Kelly for a second round.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the things we talked about, Mr. Aaron, was the grid. When I'm back in Western Pennsylvania and I get a chance to visit with the folks I represent, I go into a lot of the people that do the machinist. I talked to one of my friends up in Meadville, and he was saying, hey, are you guys going to get this thing taken care of with the grid? Are you guys going to do something about this? Because the problem I have is that, I can't afford the surge. I said, what do you mean the surge? He goes, well, I can't turn these machines on and then have there be a dip in the power, because then I have to go back and restart and recalibrate and everything. He said, you know the cost of doing that? I said, no, I absolutely have no idea the cost. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, it's going to put us out of business. The reliability of the grid is also one of those things that is absolutely critical. So, Mr. Aaron, when we talk about all these different alternative uses, really only, you look at what we've done with coal over the years. I'm talking about something that's so consistent and so reliable and so affordable. What's the purpose in all that? I know you talk a little about the grid keeping up, but the reality of it is these surges also really affect these businesses and their ability to power up their machines. So, how often do you see that? It's going to become more and more prevalent, I would think.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Kelly, you bring up a very good point. And it is part of the evolution of technology. There's so much greater use of electronics and electronic controls and things like that, much more than there were decades ago. And this is the kind of equipment that is not very tolerant of even a fraction of a second blip in the voltage or the frequency. And so it's more and more important that the grid reliability be maintained. I'll tell you from my experience, the utilities know how to maintain grid reliability. They know what needs to be done. It's not rocket science, but it's fundamentals. You've got to have enough grid, you've got to have enough transmission, you've got to have enough generators, and you've got to deal with the upsets. And as I mentioned before, the the biggest problem that I see challenge coming for the grid is intermittent resources growing to be a larger and larger percentage of the supply, which is going to introduce an environment that's not the norm that they're used to, and there's going to be a learning curve, and during that learning curve, there's probably going to be problems.